Recording. All right, welcome everyone. I'm Renee Pierce here. I've got Jessica Holman, and we're going to be talking about communities of inquiry today. We're going to introduce ourselves and do a little introduction activity with all of you. And then we'll get to really into the bulk of what this webinar is about. What is a community of inquiry and why are they important? And then provide you guys with some ideas of how to build relationships to engage students in the content in a pre-K to 12 online learning classroom. But as we are, all of us on this webinar are face-to-face classroom teachers, they will carry over to a face-to-face classroom as well. All right, so first, I am Renee Pierce. I've been teaching, this is my 7th year, and they've all been at Carmel High School. I teach geometry, and I am also in the co-taught program with geometry.
I'm Jessica Holman. This is my 15th year teaching and my 8th year at Carmel High School. I currently teach PCI, Pre-Calculus Intermediate, to juniors and seniors. I teach a regular geometry class, and I have 2 ENL shelter geometry classes as well.
All right, we've got some of our coworkers here. So as an introduction activity, I should probably share the link to this presentation with you guys so that you can actually access this link. But we are going to, when you click that link in a moment, I'm going to share it in the chat. If my Wi-Fi decides to work.
While Renee's getting this all set up, at any point, if you have any questions, feel free to post your questions in the chat and we can address those when necessary.
That should, if you're unable to access this Google slide deck, let me know. Just a little bit about this introduction activity. You are able to add your own slide, and you will put your name in the middle, add your name and your preferred pronouns. And then 4 to 6 pictures that tell us about you. And you can do a simple Google search. Like I looked for math and found this one that says 2 + 2 = 4. But this is mine. I went to Eastern Illinois. This was one of our logos while I was there. I still currently like to do yoga and work out, stay active. I like to read in some of the little free time that I have. And then up here is my little fam.
And this is my slide. Again, I'm Jessica Holman. I go by she and her. I have my husband and my 2 children, and we enjoy hiking. So you can see in the picture that we spent some time this fall hiking, and it was beautiful outside. I have my dog Max, and I enjoy running with my pup Max. I enjoy working jigsaw puzzles. I'm an avid roller coaster rider and hope to soon join the Roller Coasters Club of America. I went to Ball State University, but I was born and raised a Buckeye fan, and I look forward to getting back to the stadium next year and watching another live football game. And I eat ice cream every single night, and that is my food of choice if given the opportunity.
You eat ice cream every night?
I do. I go through like a gallon a week.
That's impressive. That's impressive.
That's why I run, so that I can eat all the ice cream I want. But take a few minutes if you want to. If you're not comfortable uploading pictures or find anything, you're welcome just to write a couple phrases about yourself or some interests so that we can get to know a little bit more about you.
Okay, so how do we get started?
Just became my new best friend with
I
her
was
Ohio
just gonna
State
say,
logo.
I see Ohio State there.
How do we get started, Jess?
Just write your name. Have you found a Google slide? There is a plus up in the upper left corner. And if you hit the plus, you can add a new slide.
I'm sorry, I don't see plus.
Okay.
Gotcha. You said upper left, right?
Yes.
Okay.
If you click on it, does it give you an option for add a new slide?
Looks like it, but I don't see it. I'm your problem student.
Rod, did you click on the link that was in the chat?
No.
Okay, in the chat, there's a link to open up the Google slide. You're probably right now just looking at at my screen that I'm recording.
Yeah.
So in the chat, if you click on that link, the Google slide deck should open up for you.
I don't see it. That's okay. Can I pass?
Yes, that's
Yes,
fine.
that's fine. Okay, wonderful. Well, Carrie and Lisa and Chris, welcome, welcome. Some other variations of this, I have actually done that second one there, like an avatar share. I had my co-taught geometry students create their own avatar and upload it to their Google slide deck for our gamified geometry classroom. That gives the students a little more choice. They can make it look like themselves or make it look like a fictional character. And you can also treat a Google slide like each student's locker, and they get, I know when I was in school, it was cool to add pictures of your friends and your sports teams and fun little trinkets. So with the online classroom, obviously there's not a locker for the students to decorate. So you can treat this as like a virtual locker of sorts for your students.
Carrie, that's great. How did your students respond to doing a virtual locker? Did they enjoy it? Did they have a chance to share about it? Did you get any good feedback from them?
They couldn't follow the directions.
That's awesome.
Well, that's fun. I mean, I think that the goal is to learn about the students. So as long as they're sharing information about themselves, so that not only you, but the other students in the class can get to learn more about them. That's what counts. So that's awesome.
So what is a community of inquiry? When we talk about community, we're talking about a feeling of belonging, and we want our students to feel like they belong in our classroom. And that includes socially being able to interact with other students, their peers, feeling connected with their peers and the teacher, and then also being able to feel comfortable with the work that they're doing, the strategies that they're using, so that they can really engage themselves in the classroom and look at all different aspects of the teaching. Now, when we look at a community of inquiry model, one of the drawbacks of online learning in the past has been the feeling that students are isolated. And I kind of feel like our students who came back from the virtual setting last year, and when our students came back, they did feel isolated. And I think part of that is just the lack of professional development and knowledge that we had on how best to interact with our students in an online classroom. Students actually in an online environment have more opportunities to interact, not only with their peers, but also with the community. And so they can create a local network, a global network. They have so much information. And the key is teaching the students how to interact with all of those different possibilities. The hard part is if students don't know how to interact. So it is our responsibility as a teacher to show them and teach them all of the ways that they should be interacting with each other. I think it's pretty unique. Renee and I we're finishing up a 6-week course, and I haven't necessarily talked one-on-one with any individual because the courses are so short, but I feel like I know a lot of everybody in our class. And our professor has done a great job of allowing us to communicate on various platforms so that we can interact with them and get to know them, but also doing our own work and our own learning as well. So the community of inquiry model was developed in between 1997 and 2001, and it supports multiple learning strategies. So personalized learning strategy, collaborative learning strategies, and constructivist learning strategies. There's 3 key principles, the community of inquiry model: a social presence, a teaching presence, and a cognitive presence. Social presence are the student-to-student interactions and the students feeling connected to their learning environment. Okay. The cognitive present is student-to-student to content interactions. So it's interacting with other students, but really diving into the work and using their interactions with each other to, I'm losing my thoughts, but to interact with the lessons and the information so that they have a higher understanding of what they're trying to learn and make it meaningful to themselves. But none of this can happen without the teaching presence. And it's challenging, but as a teacher, we have to make sure that we are facilitating social and cognitive presences throughout the entire course. This isn't something where we can do a couple of team building activities the first day or the first week of school and then not really touch on that again. This is a process that needs to continue to be practiced and worked on through the duration of the course. Now we're going to take a little bit of time and we're going to look at each presence in a little bit more detail: the social presence, the teaching presence, and the cognitive presence.
So this graphic here just kind of illustrates how each of these presences interact with each other. You can see there at the top with the social presence and the cognitive presence, it's great to have those two, but without the teaching presence to set the climate, regulate learning, set expectations up front, the educational experience isn't at its peak. Okay, so being able to blend all 3 of these presences together effectively is really what the community of inquiry is about. Okay.
All right, we're going to start with the teaching presence. The teaching presence is how we as teachers are interacting with our students. When I think back to when we went all virtual when the pandemic began, the only interaction I had with my students was through announcements and Canvas emails. I'm not sure, because at that point I was figuring out what Zoom was. It took me a couple weeks to make videos. The screencasting idea and webinar was pretty foreign to me. And so what happened is I really had little interaction whatsoever with my students unless I had a student email me. And I even offered some Zoom meetings towards the end, but the students did not engage in those. And so I feel like I failed as a teacher during that virtual period because I had no interaction with my students. So what are the different ways that we can interact with students? Okay, number 1 is we can do individual conferencing. Okay, Zoom is, in my opinion, the best platform to do that, but taking the time, even 10 or 15 minutes to Zoom with a student, you can just have personal conversations, get to know a little bit more about them. You can do direct instruction through Zoom. So if you see a student is getting off task or they need to be guided back in the right direction because they're spending time looking something up that's not necessary, that's a great opportunity for individual conferencing. Talk with students about how they want to approach, what their interests are, and how can you maybe create a project based on what you're learning and their interests. Individual conferencing is a great opportunity to work individually with students and build a relationship with those students. Okay. Number 2, group lifetime. Okay, once a week, maybe twice a week, getting the entire class together as a group for a lifetime is a great way to interact with the students. And it's also an opportunity for students to see who all is in their classroom, put a face to all the names. The group lifetime doesn't have to be lengthy. It can just be a time where you share out, hey, this is what's going to happen this week. These are some deadlines you need to pay attention to. Open it up for questions and answers if students have about the syllabus and what's expected of them. But it's also a good opportunity then for other students to hear their questions and their answers as well. Okay. Weekly check-ins is another opportunity. We can email students. You can post announcements, but just checking in to make sure that students are on track of where they need to be to reach their deadlines. Make sure you can address any questions they specifically have that they don't necessarily want to answer in front of the groups, but also weekly check-ins with their families as well. Make sure the families are on board with where everybody is, how they're performing in the class, and maybe some supports or additional supports that they may need moving forward. And one of the most important aspects of the teaching presence is consistent and timely feedback. Quicker that we respond to students, then the more interactions that we can have with students. So if we're taking, 48, 3 days to get back with students, then we potentially lost 2 or 3 or 4 additional opportunities to interact with the students. So it's very important that when students reach out to us, or even when they submit assignments, we can get back with them in a timely manner. Okay. And also the sharing of resources. When students are working online, they have more resources available to them than what we really have in the classroom. Because in the classroom, we have our textbooks and we have the handouts. But when we're teaching in an online environment, kids can access a variety of different resources. And so being able to share resources that are applicable to the situation, so students aren't spending, an additional 30 or 45 minutes checking out resources that aren't applicable to what they're doing or leading them in the wrong direction. It can be a very good tool, but also it helps guide kids and keep them in the right direction. Renee, is there anything that you would like to add to the teaching presence?
Not for the teaching presence specifically, but I will be referencing them when we get to the social presence quite a bit. So we'll be able to see how all of these things kind of mesh together well to really impact the students' online learning experience in a positive way.
The cognitive presence, in my opinion, is the hardest portion of the community of inquiry to achieve, and that is students interacting and being present within their own learning. So often, especially in an in-person setting, in a math class, students complete a problem, they complete their assignment, they're done, and there's no thought put into what they've just learned, how it ties back to previous knowledge. And the cognitive presence makes or forces students to start reflecting a little bit more on what they have learned and how it ties back to previous learning. To enhance the cognitive presence, the teacher needs to support this as well, but individual conferencing is a great way. If you can pose questions to students and force them to think at a higher level more than a concrete level, then that's going to be helpful. Community and career outreach. And once we learn about students' interests, can we take what they are learning currently and tie it to their interests, and then encourage students to reach out to members of the community or the professional community and start networking and start researching how their interests and what we're doing tie together. Okay. Open educational resources. There's something called the OER Commons, and this is information posted online about our specific subject areas. It could be activities, it could be a lesson, but it's open to anybody with no copyright laws. And so we are able to use open educational resources and share those. So students who need help in a certain area or a little bit of extra practice, open educational resources are a great way to keep students on track and help them continue on the path that we're getting to. Journaling and blogging and reflecting on what they know is a great opportunity for kids to start thinking about their learning, maybe thinking about what they really understand, what they don't understand, or maybe the importance of learning the content that they are. Okay, and also e-portfolios, having students post their learning, sharing artifacts is a great way to get them thinking about what all they have learned and again, why it's going to be useful in the future. Not only is it great for students to utilize all these resources, but being able to look at other peers' portfolios and blogs is also a great opportunity for students to think about what others have learned, if they have similar views or different views, and be able to interact with the other students as well. Renee, is there anything that you'd like to add to the cognitive presence?
I was going to share the OER Commons website in the chat, but cannot access it at the moment. But that second one there, the Merlot, when I think of the open educational resources, I think of it like teachers pay teachers without having to pay for things. So there are individual assignments, there are whole units, there are projects, there are even resources for entire courses. And I think all of us would agree that it's best to not reinvent the wheel when it comes to teaching. So just having more resources that you can pull information and more resources from, I guess, is only going to help us be more effective for our students.
The OER Commons and Merlot both, I find myself sometimes trying to search the web and I'm spending 30, 40 minutes trying to find a single idea. If you go to a place, the OER Commons, I think is very user-friendly, and you just type in a topic and there can be upwards of 30 or 40 different lesson plans or activities that pertain to that topic. So it just helps to narrow down that search from the start.
Okay, and then the third presence is that social presence. So really getting the students to engage with each other. One suggestion is a social discussion thread. So in our course, we have an assignment each week that poses a question. There's a prompt and then 2 or 3 questions that we have to respond to. And then we also have to respond to other classmates' postings. So getting them to think about their own thoughts, but also reflecting on other thoughts from a new perspective. Again, we saw it in the cognitive presence, but those e-portfolios, that's a great way for getting students to connect on a personal level. The e-portfolios give students a chance to put a little bit of their personality onto the computer. Just like journaling and blogging do, especially the responding to the blogs to create those interactions. And then creating a class sort of, professional learning network, the ability to connect experts in the field, getting resources to share with others, really just bringing that social presence that we every day see in the classroom to the online learning platform. Jessica had mentioned that students were isolated. I mean, we were all isolated when we went virtual in 2020, and still I guess the internet has made the world such a small place that we are still able to connect with other math teachers, with other moms, with other coaches, with other experts so quickly and so seamlessly that we need to use that to our advantage. Okay, so do we have any questions about anything so far? Okay. So why are these communities of inquiry important for building relationships? Just like they are in a face-to-face classroom, we're going to see higher levels of engagement, higher levels of student achievement, and higher levels of satisfaction, okay? That teaching presence, the teacher is not a sharer of information anymore. The information can be found at the student's fingertips now. It is our job to facilitate that learning. So as teachers, we set the expectations, share deadlines and timelines for things. We facilitate that peer-to-peer interaction and the discussion, and like Jessica mentioned, that feedback for them. But the students really become the drivers for their learning. They have a voice in what they're learning and how they're going to show that learning. They take more ownership in their goals, and they are able to reflect on the learning process. They're able to take some time before, like in class, if someone raises their hand and we call on them, they have to respond instantly. But online, they've got a little more time to kind of gather their thoughts, make them coherent, and share them with everyone else online. But again, you see they're connecting with experts in the fields of interest. This gives them a chance to really dive into the content.
So Renee, can I add to that real quick?
Yeah.
So an example of this is what we're doing right now. So our project for this week was, really learning about this community of inquiry and creating a webinar. And that was the information that we were given. So our goal was to create a webinar on the community of learning, and that was it. And so we have taken the time this week to research on our own, what is a community of inquiry. Now, we were given some resources and some websites. Again, that's that teacher facilitation. These are some things that she felt like was really important, but then it's also our responsibility to continue the process of researching and looking at different artifacts and websites. And if we have questions, we can reach out to our professor. I sometimes come to technology, I talk to my students and I say, so how do I do this, especially with the podcast? So how do I do this? And, and even with my homework assignments here with the master's course, I've interacted with my students. I've interacted with my students in my classrooms. I've interacted with my professors, and then my peers who are also taking the course. Now, how do we transfer this over to a foreign language or to a math classroom? Time will tell, and I think that's something that we need to continue to research and look into, but I think that we could make this a meaningful experience no matter what content area or subject area we teach.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one of the most important aspects of these communities of inquiry is that the interactions between the students become more genuine. I know I've got a number of students that will walk into my classroom with a hat on, their hood up, and a mask on, and not talk to a single person voluntarily. Like I have to, it's like pulling teeth to get them even to answer my questions when I'm sitting right next to them. So those students that feel like they need to hide or they can hide in a face-to-face classroom, they can feel safer and they feel more comfortable interacting in an online forum because they've got time to process. They're more inclined to take risks, and just really that meaningful exchange of ideas is one of the most important parts of this community of inquiry. Okay, now there are some things to keep in mind. Right now, we are collaborating on this project, on this webinar, but collaboration might not always be the best choice. So knowing how and when to use that collaboration in a classroom, an online classroom, just like we've got to think about those kinds of things for our face-to-face classroom. Online, we are always worried about privacy issues, and then what platforms are going to be good for face-to-face, I guess, video interactions versus just discussions. Really taking some time to dive into different tools and resources to use for those sort of activities. And lastly, some ideas to actually start to build those relationships, to engage in the content, engage with each other. We've mentioned it several times today. The audio and the video conferencing is a great way to get people to interact with each other, just even that last point there for mental health check-ins, letting the online students know that you are human and you are there to help them as a human, not just to get them through the content. Here we've got student interest inventories. And this is going to be a mix of open-ended questions versus multiple choice questions. Okay, the open-ended questions are going to be more of getting to know your students as people. So there's going to be a wide variety of answers for these kinds of questions. But this is kind of where you will get to pull in their interests and their hobbies and those kinds of things for the content. How can we connect the content to the students' lives? And then the multiple choice questions are better for kind of the like learning environment type of thing. So these questions here, I think, like those first two are going to be more for like an in-person sort of environment, but it can apply to an online class as well. And that preferred time of day to learn, more so for the online classroom. But I mean, we see it in our classrooms. Some students are still asleep at 9 o'clock when we start class. Some students are wide awake at 9 a.m., but then after lunch, they're in a food coma and they struggle the last half of the day. So getting to know your students, not only as learners to help to better serve them as learners, but getting to know them as people also. One aspect that, or one strategy here is posing a question of the day every single day. And there's a list here that I'm going to pull up, but this was a strategy that an instructional coach from our school shared in a professional development presentation. And these questions are, oh boy, no, I want that still pulled up. But these questions are questions to start conversations in the classroom. I remember one of her examples was she asked, if you were to pick a fast food restaurant to wipe off the face of the planet, what would you pick? And that was one of the most controversial questions. Some people said Chick-fil-A, and half the class went into an uproar. And some people said Taco, and some people said White Castle. And so these questions are not just like a yes or a no question, but really questions that get the students talking. And Carrie, here you said your kids love the question of the days. And they look forward to that class for that reason. That's wonderful. Love that. So here, this will be linked in the presentation that I'll share with you all at the end. But there, I think, are 106 different questions.
So we need 74 more questions to get one for every day, 180 days.
Perfect. I'll get on that. And I actually started to do this with my co-taught students also. And that was a great way to see the students that didn't necessarily think they had anything in common to find something in common. So that is one. Oops, then we've got a frequently asked questions discussion thread. And I think this is one thing that I'm actually going to start implementing in my own face-to-face classroom. But putting a discussion on our learner management system to allow the students to pose questions for other students to answer. Because I've got a family at home. I'm not always on Canvas. I'm not on there 24/7. I can't always answer their questions in a timely manner. But if other students are on and they see that someone has posed a question and they're able to answer it and able to explain it, that actually facilitates a lot of great learning and a lot of great engagement with the content. And along with that, there's the social discussion threads that we mentioned before and mental health check-ins. Okay, now one thing that we haven't talked about, but is the etiquette for interaction in the learner management system, in the blogs, really just in the online course in general. Establishing that together ahead of time, just like we would establish classroom norms at the beginning of the school year with our students, but really distinguishing between what is appropriate and what is not appropriate in terms of responses and respecting other individuals' privacy. So some examples there. Tell me something good. This could be at the beginning of the week or at the end of the week. Students need to share one thing that went well for them. A meaningful memento, maybe just sharing a picture of one really special event or really special person so that we can kind of see that more heartfelt side of the students. And then a picture of the day, or one of my favorites was a mascot of the week where students share pictures of their pets. I think that would be enjoyable. And then some mental health check-ins. One of our teachers here at the high school calls it a vibe check, and she's got emojis posted around her classroom where students just put a little tally mark under which emoji that best explains their emotion that day, what they're feeling. And then even individually conferencing over like a brunch or a lunch or an afternoon snack, if you will, to get a feel for where the student's at, what they need help with in terms of content, but also as an individual. So
when we're looking at this as well, we have to remember that in the online classroom, you can communicate in an asynchronous manner or a synchronous manner. So asynchronous is where kids are doing things on their own time, but there's also a need for some synchronous learning as well, in which everybody meets together as a group, whether it's one-on-one with the teacher in small groups or in a large group setting. We do need to make sure that students are interacting at some point on a synchronous level as well. And it's really important to remember that community does not happen on its own. Okay, as teachers, we are the facilitator, and how we respond and we react and we build community, it's all on us. And it's really important that no matter how it starts, we continue to build upon it throughout the semester, throughout your course. And remember, there's really no end. So we will continue to communicate with our students and expect students to interact with one another throughout the entire course. Okay, it's really important that we stay genuine, be yourself. Sometimes I find in an online environment, I sound like I'm reading, but try to be yourself as best you can, just like you would as an in-person. Show emotion, use some humor, facial expressions. At least we don't have to wear masks so we can see each other's facial expressions. Don't be afraid to ask questions and compliment students and express appreciation just like we would in an in-person environment.
Thank you guys for joining us today. I just shared our presentation with you if you wish to access it to use for your own classrooms. Okay. This has been recorded, so please feel free to reach out to us if you'd like the recording. And unless there are any questions, we are done.
Do you have any questions for us?
Okay, I think we're good.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We appreciate it very, very much.